Hello, this is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for chapter 23. And we're going to talk a little bit about some things that were happening in the 1980s and 1990s. So, your questions are going to jump around a little bit. So, we're going to start with number 3. What was the first practical and affordable computer for personal use? That was the Apple IIe, invented by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. At the same time, there was a real smart man named Bill Gates who was involved in not making hardware, but making software. And he designed PC, personal computer software, that gave the instructions to be used by the computer programmers or the program the computer to perform certain tasks. And a lot of that was things like bookkeeping and word processing. We also had some other people. We had Hillary Rodham Clinton. After her husband was elected president, she was interested in bringing about a nationalized healthcare system. But this program was basically not necessarily liked by small business owners, insurance companies, doctors, and the Republican Party. And as a result of that, number 7, this whole proposed healthcare plan died without a vote in Congress. One thing that the Clintons were able to pass during the first term was the Family Medical Leave Act that gave workers up to 12 weeks uh, per year of unpaid family leave for anything from a birth or an adoption of a child or to take care of someone within their family who was ill. In 1980, there was actually in 1981, there was an assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, and his press secretary was a man named Bill Brady. During that assassination attempt, Bill Brady was shot in the head, and as a result, him and his wife worked very hard to get legislation to bring about some controls on guns. And what the Brady Bill established during the 1990s was a waiting period before people could actually buy a handgun. And handgun was what was the only thing that was um, involved in this. This would not apply to rifles or shotguns or anything like that. But uh, the background checks would be done by the police before an individual could buy that gun. Eventually, this law was kind of grandfathered out after the time elapsed on it. So it was only law for about 10 years. We're going to skip to number 15. What agreement was reached between Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Palestinian Liberation Organization leader Yasser Arafat? And the PLO, under this agreement, um, would recognize Israel's right to exist, and Israel would recognize the PLO as a representative of the Palestinians. It sounds great on paper, and this was something that had been talked about for years. Unfortunately, there's still division between Palestinians and Israelis today. We're going to skip to number 6. In 2001, shortly after 9/11, immigration came under the control of the new Department of Homeland Security and is still in its care yet to this day. And number 9, more than half of new immigrants in the 1990s came from Latin America. And so many Cuban immigrants, who obviously were from Latin America, many of them settled in the Miami area. A lot of this was shortly after the Cuban Revolution in 1959. But as a result of this, the Miami Dade County region has basically um, probably as many Cuban Americans or Cubans as Havana does. So it's a huge, I guess you could say, community of Cubans. Under Section 4, number 2, one means of increasing international trade was to create regional trade pacts or free trade zones, such as the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement. This was an agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Under the Trump administration, this agreement has been renamed to U.S. MECA, which is now the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement, which for the most part has kind of renewed the ties, but also put some safeguards in there for the United States. Under number four, some 120 nations during the early 90s formed the World Trade Organization. Part of this was to administrate um, international trade agreements to make sure everybody was playing fairly. We're going to skip down to number nine. In 1987, 23 nations agrees to phase out the use of chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs, which were used primarily in aerosol cans, sometimes in some air conditioning units, because of the fact that it could weaken the ozone layer, and because a lot of people are concerned about global warming and such. This was an agreement that a lot of people became very interested in. And number 10, global warming could eventually lead to more droughts and other forms of extreme weather. And in number 11, in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was signed by 38 nations in the European Union. The United States did not, I guess you could say, authorized the treaty. The president was kind of all for it, but when you ratify a treaty, it's got to go through the U.S. Senate, and they could not agree upon it. And a lot of it is the fact that some of the countries that were a part of this weren't putting pressure on countries like China and other polluters to clean up their act. All right. Thank you very much.